What's up, crones? I'm back on the journey of becoming Terry Davis little by little. Today I slipped a few extra pegs into schizophrenic delusion, which is, you're probably wondering, like, how do you even measure your progress towards becoming Terry Davis? It is kind of complicated because it's hard to quantify, but basically it's technical understanding of low-level programming against schizophrenic delusion. And one of the things I realized recently, which I would put in the schizophrenic delusion camp, is that this is Patagonia. This is Patagonia. And you see this little triangle here. If you zip this up perfectly, it completely lines up with the triangle. The perspective is not showing it adequately, but trust me, it does. Can that really be coincidence? I don't think so, based on them being the same brand. And then technical understanding is I kind of understand allocators and low-level memory management a little bit better because I read a blog post about it. But that's enough technical computer science for 1 week on this channel. What I want to talk about today is metacognitive thinking theory and a bunch of useless optimization and productivity pseudoscience. So I was thinking about thinking the other day, which is accelerating my descent into schizophrenia. And I was thinking that a lot of the thinking that I do is thanks to other people or because of other people. And by that I mean, more clearly, I'm just hearing what other people have to say and then kind of not thinking about it very much. You ever like watch your favorite YouTuber who's like kind of underqualified 20-year-old with no degrees or no real world experience, just yapping about random patterns he's observing in life, and you just sit there and you smile and nod. Maybe you've done this with Luke Smith or girl Luke Smith or 33-year-old Norwegian Luke Smith or any of the other derivatives of this kind of internet character. Luke Smith once said this himself, that you shouldn't consume content. He has kind of a video that's become a channel meme where you shouldn't overconsume and not really think. And it's funny because a lot of people like joke about that, but then still kind of mindlessly consume Luke Smith's takes. And the reason I say a lot of people is I'm just talking about myself here, because a lot of the time I just kind of smile and nod along with whatever's going on, and I just consume it. And it's so much goddamn work to think through each thing someone is saying and like pause it and then see if you agree. It's just, no. And you just smile and nod and you think, yeah, they're right. That's relatable. Yeah, I've been through that too. I've kind of noticed that pattern too. But then when the video ends, you're like, what actionable piece of advice did I get from that video? Maybe I've said something to you. Maybe I've given you an idea, like, oh, you should only go like n levels of abstraction deep or n+1 levels of abstraction deep. You should peel back the onion that many times and look at the patterns at that level. Or proverbs are a really ingenious piece of technology because they're tons of condensed information, like all back to back, or they're generations like stacking all their information together into an easy to remember little poem that's like a pattern about the world. You should be using proverbs and aphorisms everywhere. And maybe you've heard some little piece of advice like that. But how many of those little pieces of advice have you heard from YouTube channels or books that you've just like completely just not paid attention to? Maybe for 2 days you were like, holy shit, that proverb idea is fucking genius. Wow, Zen Buddhism is like a productivity technology that's amazing. And maybe one of those things is completely caught on with you. But if I had to bet based on my personal experience, like 9 out of 10 of those little like life hack patterns about the world it just like slips through the cracks, and you like use it for 1 or 2 days and then never use it again. And I think the reason for that is it's very difficult to like spoon feed people conclusions. Like in order to see the proverb pattern and like actually use it, you can't just be told you should be doing this. It doesn't stick. It's like you have to think about it yourself, and you have to really like sit there and ponder, okay, why does this idea work? And I'm not like, generally this is not a problem in a hard science like math or computer science. Like you can be told something, apply it once, and then you're like, yes, that is right, I see the logic behind that. But when you're dealing with all this like meta cognitive life stuff or like vague third level type generic type advice about life, like using proverbs to cut off certain patterns like no free lunch or whatever, that stuff is it's so abstract. It's really hard for your mind to, in order to apply that, you have to kind of keep it in your working memory. You have to keep it in RAM, but your working memory can only hold so many things at once, so eventually it just gets flushed out. What you want is to turn it into like a pattern that's just in your soul and that you believe. But it's very hard to do that from just watching videos. Like it really feels like you're doing a lot of productive work for yourself. But I'm starting to think that it would be much more productive to just like read one proverb every half a fortnight and then spend like a week to 7 days around that much time just really thinking hard about how does this proverb like actually apply? Like what are the instances I've seen? It, like really try to take a piece of advice and like think deeply about it. I feel like I don't do enough thinking compared to just like mindlessly consuming information. Like I'm not sure that any of the ideas I've had are especially mine. And when I was talking about first principles thinking, I logic and stuff is cool, but it's more like just sitting there and like reasoning your way to a conclusion rather than being told it. And by the way, this isn't any of this isn't me. I just read this in this book by Neil Postman. I'm not really even sure that I agree with it, so I'll probably forget about most of what I said in this video in about 2 weeks and then rehash it slightly differently because I don't really write scripts and all my ideas kind of bleed into each other. But I don't know. You guys still watching, and I still need my $10.80 in ad revenue so that I can afford some breakfast sausages. You know, the economy is gotten quite bad in America. I'm starting to think there's a big conspiracy to make everyone fight against each other and then have some kind of systemic collapse. That's another symptom of Terry Davis syndrome, is you start to extrapolate big patterns about society and overarching themes in history, but I try not to worry about it too much. Another thing that made me kind of tweak the other day, not in the physical sense, really, I was just sitting there kind of quietly and respectfully tweaking in my mind, is what you want out of life, right? How many of your desires are your own desires and not some like implanted desire of marketing or like societal expectations? You know, like if you write down a list of the things you want out of life, how many of those things are actually what you as an individual want? Probably not many of them, which is like I see the progression to Luke Smith style, like sitting out in the woods, or Terry Davis, like alienation from society. Like the more you read, the more you are curious about things, the more you start to realize like how smart some people out there are, and how much of an agenda they have, and how much people are willing to try to influence each other using like social sciences. And yeah, advertising and the media and everything we have is really somewhat of it seems just like a chaotic mess unfolding, and half of me believes that it's kind of just like all this social media and all this media in general and all these things are just like a random result of a technological explosion, and the other half is like, what if it's all engineered by someone? What if there are people pulling the strings behind all these things? But that's some real Terry Davis territory. I'm not planning on going there until about 2027, just because I need to build up my technical skills before I become too deluded. Otherwise, it's just kind of embarrassing. Then you're just like a vanilla crackhead on the street. You know, you're not really contributing much. I have to first develop some kind of operating system or new browser protocol or something before I completely lose my marbles. But I don't know. I'm dabbling a little bit in that side of insanity. And yeah, back to the main thesis of the video. It's just that, in case you forgot, which you probably did because your working memory is just like processing this video in small chunks, and there's no real conclusion you're going to take from this other than like 10 minutes of mild amusement. We don't really like think too much about a lot of what we consume anymore. We're just like spoon-fed random conclusions that we kind of like shrug and smile through, like, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that guy's maybe kind of onto something. And then since you're not really thinking all that hard about any of it, it's just kind of like more noise into your brain. I think we have way too many kind of conclusions that are just being like just ladled into your mouth relentlessly. Like society and the internet is just like holding you down and like peeling your mouth open, and they just have like a big stew ladle, and they're just like ladling information slop into your mouth over and over again. And yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you thought of this one. I got this information from aimlessly consuming tons of disparate random information from books instead of YouTube videos for a change, which I think made it a little more high quality, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. I'll see you next